Ready for a deep dive? Today, we're heading to Rome.
Always a good time to talk about Rome.
And not just the gladiators and chariots Rome, though I do love a good chariot race movie. We're talking about the layers of history, the Rome built on top of itself over centuries, and we've got some really cool sources to dig into.
You hit it right there, the layers. Rome's like a living timeline, you know. You've got ancient ruins next to modern apartments. It's wild.
So are you ready to peel back those layers and see what makes Rome tick?
Let's do it.
Okay, so first things first. Founding myths. Everyone's heard the Romulus and Remus story, right? Raised by a she-wolf.
Classic.
But the source material you gave me, it's got a bunch of other theories about where the name Rome comes from, where the people came from. It's not so simple.
It's true, yeah. The very beginning of Rome, it's like this puzzle with missing pieces. For example, Rome comes from Rumon.
Rome.
Yeah, it was the ancient name for the Tiber River. Shows you how important that river was right from the start.
Makes sense. The lifeblood of the city.
Then you've got others saying, no, it's from the Etruscan Ruma, meaning peak.
Teat, like...
Exactly, like on a wolf. Maybe ties back into that she-wolf legend, or even the shape of those 7 hills Rome's built on. And then there's Ruma, the Greek word for strength. So many possibilities.
So from day one, Rome was this mix of cultures and influences, even before it was an empire.
100%. And speaking of cultural mix, we got to talk about the Etruscans and the Sabines. They weren't just Roman neighbors, they were deeply influential.
The source material goes deep on that, and it's something I think gets overlooked. We say Roman, and we picture this one specific thing, but it was a melting pot early on.
Totally. The Etruscans, for example, they were so ahead of their time. Art, engineering, even their alphabet. We're talking influences that run deep in what we think of as Roman.
And what about the Sabines? I feel like I mostly remember the story about the Sabine women.
Ah, yes, the Sabine women. That whole incident where, let's just say, the Romans acquired wives for themselves. A little bit of a controversial chapter, but it shows you how intertwined these early communities were and how Rome was starting to assert itself.
Sounds like those early power struggles were pretty key.
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't just about a few villages squabbling. These conflicts laid the foundation for everything that Rome would become.
So from there, how do we get to the Roman Republic? It feels like a big jump.
It was a huge deal. We're talking about a whole new way of governing. Forget kings and emperors, at least for a while. Romans decided they wanted a say in how they were ruled.
And it wasn't just a free-for-all, right? Didn't they have, like, elected officials and laws and stuff?
Exactly. They had this system with elected officials, checks and balances, even debates and power struggles within the ruling class itself. And you know what? Those internal struggles actually helped shape Rome.
How so?
Well, it forced them to adapt, to become more inclusive, to constantly refine their laws and systems. It wasn't always pretty, but it definitely made them stronger.
So their capacity for arguing and compromising, at least sometimes, was actually a strength.
I'd say so. But of course, you don't build an empire on internal politics alone. Enter the Roman legions.
Ah, yes, the mighty Roman army.
The source material you provided mentioned the Punic Wars against Carthage. These were absolutely pivotal moments in Roman history.
Because it wasn't just a border skirmish, right? We're talking massive wars that spanned decades.
Huge. These wars were about dominance over the entire Mediterranean. And when Rome emerged victorious, they didn't just get land. They got control over trade routes, resources. They became a major power player on the world stage.
It makes you wonder, what if Carthage had won those wars? Would Rome even be a blip on the radar today?
It's a question historians still debate. But what we do know is that those victories in the Punic Wars were a turning point. They fueled Roman expansion, filled their coffers, and set the stage for the next chapter, the Roman Empire.
And at the center of that empire was an emperor, Augustus, kicking off that whole lineage we think of with Roman rulers. But going from a republic to an empire, that's a big shift.
Massive. Yeah, we're not just talking about a name change here. This was a fundamental shift in how Rome saw itself, how it operated. And what's fascinating, the source material points this out, is that Augustus, even with all that emperor power, he knew appearances mattered.
So he played the game, kept up some of those republic traditions so people didn't freak out too much.
Exactly. He knew Romans were attached to the idea of a republic, so he kept some of those systems in place, at least symbolically. And you know what? It worked. That period, the Pax Romana, it was pretty stable. Imagine that, an empire stretching across Europe, North Africa, into the Middle East, and it's relatively peaceful for a couple hundred years. That's when Roman culture, their laws, their whole way of doing things, It really took root and spread. It's the foundation for so much of Western civilization.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it, how much we take for granted now. Laws, government, even just like plumbing. That all traces back to the Romans.
Right. It's wild. But even empires like Rome, they don't last forever. The source material talking about the decline of the Western Roman Empire, all those problems they ran into, invasions, the economic troubles, internal fighting, a whole thing.
Yeah, it's a bit of a downer. But here's where Rome throws a curveball, right? The empire might have been crumbling, but Rome itself, the city, it was like, nope, not done yet. Because while all that was going down, you have the rise of the Catholic Church, and Rome's right at the center of it.
Huge turning point. This is where those historical layers really start to stack on top of each other. Rome, even with a smaller population, less political clout, it still had this massive symbolic power. It was the seat of the Catholic Church, after all.
So the Pope, being the Bishop of Rome, he sort of inherited some of that emperor-style influence.
In a way, yeah. The Pope became incredibly powerful, taking on some of the administrative roles, even the authority that the emperors used to have.
So Rome might have been down, but it was far from out.
Exactly. And this is where we get the Papal States. Rome becomes its own political entity again, controlling territory in central Italy, playing a huge role in both religious and political life throughout Europe. And these weren't just figurehead popes either. They were in the thick of it. Alliances, power struggles, even wars to protect their interests.
Like that part in the source material about the Muslim siege of Rome in 846 AD, that must have been intense.
Oh, absolutely. It was a huge deal. Here's Rome, this city that was once the heart of a massive empire, and now it's vulnerable, being attacked, its holy sites plundered. Shows you just how unstable things were. The Papal States were constantly having to fight for their survival, caught between all these different factions.
Sounds like one challenge after another. But if there's one thing we know about Rome, it's that they were resilient.
For sure. And we see that resilience on full display when we look at the Roman Commune. For a brief time, they managed to govern themselves, throwing off both the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor. They wanted autonomy, the ability to chart their own course.
The city had a mind of its own. And speaking of new courses, that brings us to the Renaissance, right? Another major turning point for Rome.
Absolutely. But it wasn't just about pretty art and architecture, although there's plenty of that. The Renaissance, especially for the papacy, it was about projecting power and prestige.
So instead of conquering with armies, they conquered with art.
You got it. They were masters of perception. They used the talents of artists like Michelangelo and Raphael, creating these incredible works that showcased Rome as a center of culture and power. Think St. Peter's Basilica, the Sistine Chapel ceiling, pure awe-inspiring stuff.
And the source material really focuses on those two artists. What was it about Michelangelo and Raphael that made them such superstars, even now?
Talent? Sure. But they captured something essential about the Renaissance. Michelangelo, with his sculptures, his paintings, he was all about human emotion, the beauty of the human form. Think about the David, the symbol of strength and defiance, or his Pietà, so full of sorrow and tenderness. Raphael, on the other hand, he brought this incredible sense of harmony, of balance, to his work. His paintings, like the School of Athens, they're celebrations of knowledge, of human potential.
It's like they were rediscovering the best of humanity, and they did it in Rome, this city already overflowing with history.
Exactly. The magic of the Renaissance in Rome, it wasn't just about recreating the past, it was about breathing new life into it. It showed the world that Rome was still a place of creativity and beauty.
But even during the Renaissance, they couldn't escape conflict entirely, could they?
Sadly, no. The sack of Rome in 1527, it's a brutal reminder that even with all that beauty, violence was never far away. It's a dark moment, but it also highlights again that Roman resilience, that ability to rebuild and reinvent.
Every time someone tried to knock Rome down, it came back stronger.
It's true. And that leads us to a really important question, one that's key to understanding Rome today. How does a city with such a heavy past exist in the modern world?
Right, because we're not just talking about Rome as a museum exhibit. We want to know what makes this modern city tick. So from Renaissance City, how do we get to the Rome of today? With, traffic and apartments and Wi-Fi. It wasn't just a straight line on the timeline, was it?
Rome doing anything in a straight line. Come on, this is the city where you trip over ancient ruins on your way to get a cappuccino.
Yeah.
But yeah, to get modern Rome, we got to look at what shaped Italy as a whole.
Okay, so give me the SparkNotes version. What were those big historical moments that brought Rome into the 20th century and beyond? The source material mentioned this Italian economic miracle, and I got to know more.
Right, so picture this. Italy after World War II, things are pretty rough. But then, boom, this incredible period of growth kicks off. Industries were coming back, cities were expanding, people's lives were changing rapidly. And Rome, being the capital, it's in the middle of all of it.
A time of massive change, which honestly seems pretty on brand for Rome.
Right. Change is practically baked into the city. And as Italy's economy took off, Rome had to adapt.
Yeah.
New neighborhoods popping up, people coming from all over to find work. It was a lot to handle.
So you've got that reshaping the city. What else? I mean, you can't talk about Rome without mentioning tourism. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Tourism is huge EE for Rome, no way around it. You got millions of people showing up every year wanting to see the Colosseum, the Vatican, all that history, and the food. Let's not forget the food.
Those carbs are calling. But that's what I loved about the source material, too. Rome's not just stuck in the past. It's this living, breathing city.
Right. And the foods is a perfect example. Sure, you've got pizza and pasta, but Roman cuisine goes so much deeper. It's all about fresh, seasonal stuff. Artichokes a million ways, amazing cheese and cured meats, those simple but perfect pasta dishes.
You're making me hungry. But you're right. It's like to really get it, you got to skip the tourist traps and find those little backstreet places, the ones where they're still making the pasta by hand.
Exactly. It's about experiencing the soul of the city, the stuff that makes it feel timeless and totally current at the same time. And that's not just the food either. The fashion scene in Rome, top-notch.
Wait, so we're talking more than togas and sandals these days.
Way more. Valentino, Bulgari, Fendi, these are names everyone knows. And it's cool how they take inspiration from both ancient Rome and modern trends.
Even the fashion brings together all those layers of history.
Exactly. It's a city that never stops evolving, never stops finding new ways to express itself. But that connection to the past, that's always there.
This deep dive has been amazing. We've gone from myths to emperors, Renaissance art to designer handbags. It's a lot to take in. So if you had to leave our listener with one thing to think about, what would it be?
Don't just see Rome, experience it. Don't just look at the Colosseum, hear the roar of the crowd, picture those gladiators in your head. Imagine those senators arguing in the forum. Feel that energy. Rome's more than just ruins, it's a living, breathing story.
So we're telling our listener to become a time traveler.
100%. And as you're exploring those different layers of history, really pay attention. Notice how the ancient and the modern exist side by side. You might have a Renaissance palace that's now a government building, or a guy selling souvenirs in the shadow of a temple that's been there for 2,000 years. It's incredible.
Because those layers, they're not separate, are they? They're all connected, all part of what makes Rome unique.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe thousands of years from now, someone will be digging around in the ruins of our civilization, trying to understand us, just like we're trying to understand the Romans. It makes you think, doesn't it? What will our layers say about us?
That's something to ponder. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the heart of Rome. Until next time.